Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Help My Business is Growing, a podcast where we explore how to grow and build a business that is healthy and sustainable. I'm your host, Kathy Svatina. Having a sales infrastructure in place is crucial to a growing business, but building one requires consideration and planning. So, in this episode, we are going to explore what are the critical pieces needed to build a tailor fit to your needs sales infrastructure that will set up your business for success. And before we go into this episode, I want to give you a quick reminder that all of the episodes on this podcast, including this one, come with timestamps for topics that we discuss, and each one has its own blog post as well. You can find all the links and the detailed topics in this episode's show notes. My guest today is Eric Balis. He is a fractional VP of Sales and a founder of top-tier sales advisors. He helps owners of companies realize the maximum value of the company by accelerating their revenue production and helping their sales team achieve excellent and repeatable results. He also concentrates on helping small and mid-sized companies optimize their sales strategy, their process, and education. He helps companies transform their sales culture, implement sales processes and procedures, and instill best practices. He focuses not just on the strategic level, but also on the tactical level to help companies achieve record-breaking sales results. This is going to be an excellent conversation, so please join us. Welcome to the show, Eric.
I appreciate it, Kathy. Thank you for letting me be part of the show today.
Well, thanks so much for being here. We're going to talk about something that's really important for growing businesses, and that it's sales infrastructure. Because building a right sales infrastructure is crucial for a business that's looking to drive growth. And an effective sales infrastructure includes a combination of a lot of things. And we're going to be discussing what are the key considerations, what are the best practices for building this strong sales infrastructure. But before we go into that, let's just first talk about what does it really mean to have a sales infrastructure built into the business? How does that look like?
So a sales infrastructure and the proper infrastructure, as you said, are two different things. One is having the right sales process is important. So for instance, from when you get a lead or a hand raise or just a contact to actually contacting them, having the right, I call it a touch plan, but a touch plan in place of how you're going to contact them, the means, whether that's phone, email, text, social media, and being able to record those conversations every step of the way, and then when the next contact is. So having a cadence in place of how you're going to contact, when you're going to contact, by what means you're going to contact, what information are you sending folks, because it's all part of what I call the education process. And the sales process today it's really not about selling. It's about educating.
Yep.
You have to do a lot of educating. If you're educating, that's the best thing. If you're selling, you're behind the eight ball. You're really behind the eight ball because your competitors are out there selling. If you're educating and telling people exactly what your product or service does for a problem, and problems are three things, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but either adding to revenue, decreasing costs, or improving operational efficiencies, it needs to answer one, if not all three of those. Your solution has to answer one, if not all three of those. And the salesperson's job is to educate the buyer of how and why the solution is different. So at the beginning of the process, what I call a sales process, there's one question to answer is, what is your why? Why is your product better? Or, why is your company better? Why do you do this? Why your product over somebody else?
When you were talking about educating the buyers, which is really important, I think this is very important in the service-based businesses like our business.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost goes hand in hand with marketing as well. And what I've noticed on the market, especially, I follow a lot of people on LinkedIn that are in sales and in marketing. And there's this push with marketing and sales really have to work hand in hand these days to educate the buyer before they even come to you. So there's a lot of importance done these days on content marketing. So let's talk about this. How do you see content marketing and sales? How do they fit together?
So I think you can't have one without the other, and it's got to be effective. It's got to be effective where the messaging is getting out to the market and really creating that first level of education to get hand raise in the process. So demand generation or a market creation would first seed the market. I call it a seed, harvest, and lock, kind of strategy where you first go out and you seed the market and you educate the market on what the capabilities and what problems your product or service is trying to solve. And once you have the foundation laid down, is you'll be able to then effectively outbound outreach to people to get them in the process. It's going to take anywhere between 8 and 12 touches before you get a hand raised that I'm interested. I'm even interested in this product or service. So I think it's the more content that you can provide them that's educational in value, not just marketing type material. It's educational in value, goes over why your product or solution answers a fundamental problem.
And I see that also that you do get feedback from the market as you're having those conversations with your buyers. You know exactly what problems they have, and those problems are feeding into the content. It's almost like a loop, feedback loop by itself.
Yep.
And the best way what I have noticed is that creating content that directly answers those types of questions that you are getting from the buyers, just being helpful as much as you can. It's almost like the content by itself becomes a full-time salesperson in your business. And then by the time it gets to the salespeople or to you, if you're doing the sales, you're really just filling in that tiny little gap that like pushes them over to buy, correct?
Right. So it's a very good example that you brought up. So if you lay down the right foundation with education, once they come to you as a kind of a hand raise, your job is to really establish a relationship and establish credibility on why your product or service is superior to somebody else's. And, why would they do business with the company and why would they do business on this product, and really, answer the questions that they may have around some features and functions, but what does this actually mean for the business?
And being a finance person, obviously I always relate that into the finance. It's like, yeah, this is all great and fine and dandy with the marketing and sales, but what does that really do for the business? And that is really how you create the growth for the business and the high quality revenue, because you're getting in the door customers that are high quality customers. Because I always say not every single revenue is good revenue. Like every
Correct.
sale is good sale. So let's talk a little bit about, if you can give us an example where the businesses that you've helped with, if you can have an example of someone that has done this exceptionally well.
So I worked with a finance company where their messaging was really not correct in the beginning. It was something that they needed to define. So I went in and we defined their ideal client profile, first of all, because it can't be everybody across everybody. We define their ideal client profile down to kind of their target market where they started to target more effectively. They were doing about $1 million in sales the first year. After I went in, we increased about 27% the first year. So where they needed to be was to get more hand raises. So once you identified your target market, the next thing was more hand raises. So they couldn't do it with the exact staff they had in place.
Mm-hmm.
I helped them hire their next salesperson and really take the time on why would this person be successful within the company. And it took 6 weeks to hire this person, and we put them on a 360-day onboarding plan. And the importance of that is you know where they are all the time, because in every sales position, it takes time to ramp up. And the average ramp up time is 6 months. In any sales position is about 6 months. So for that first 6 months, you want to make sure that they're getting the education they need, the support they need, the resources they need so they can hit the ground running sometime before 6 months. But, effectively after 6 months, they are fully trained, fully able to go out and market the solution, go out to prospects, go out to customers and sell value at that point. That's the challenge for a small business, is the ramp up time. You try to get it done quicker, but you have to give that person the right information. You really have to. And you have to give them the right resources, and you really have to spend the time. You have to spend time. I tell people time is good and bad. You have less time today to spend with people, but you need to spend that time so they get to the right outcomes. They're able to hit the ground running. They're fully trained. They're up to speed real quick.
So it's an investment today that pays off in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's more investing today because sales in general has changed from just outbound to more inbound and educational. It's a different framework of change, and it goes across generations. This isn't just one generation, but I think the younger millennials and Generation Zs have challenges amongst themselves, communicational challenges that my generation didn't have. I mean, my generation didn't have a computer growing up. We didn't have a cell
Yeah.
phone. We didn't have those things. We had to talk to people. And, this in the game of sales, you're still not going to get it done without the use of a phone. Calling out and outbound calling people is still an art in sales. It's an art of, people don't want to do it, and people don't want to prospect. They don't. I'm going to tell you, it's not the most glamorous part of the position, and they need to do it. You need to do it. You may not get a person on the phone. You may leave them a message, and it's that multiple touches of somebody that creates the awareness and that they know who and what your company does.
Going back to this company that you helped, what was it about their messaging that they changed that helped to facilitate the sales process?
Sure. They went to a more finite message, a more granular message as to why and how they help companies in their market. They're a service-based business. So how they help certain companies. When we went to market on a touch plan, we developed a 3x3 campaign where there's 3 different voicemails that we leave and 3 different email follow-ups. And within those, there's examples of how they've helped certain companies. They weren't doing that. It was just, calling up on from certain company and you should take my call. That doesn't work. That doesn't work anymore. There's a fundamental change that doesn't work. So it's really changing the messaging of why they're calling. Here's who we've helped, and contact me here. And then constant follow-up with the educational information that you discussed earlier. That's so important.
So what I'm hearing is messaging, but there was a lot of structure that happened.
Yeah,
in terms
it was
of
foundational. It was foundational. It was really to get them to use their CRM more effectively. They weren't sending emails out through their CRM, so they didn't have a grasp on who would actually open an email. It's important to see how many people actually open your email to see if it's effective or not. Is the message reaching the market? And the first month we did it, they were at like 11% open rate. Now after a year, they're at like a 31% open rate. So we've increased the open rate. It increases awareness and increases their ability to contact people.
Is there a standard of what is considered to be a good open rate, an average open rate, or a low open
Yeah,
rate?
I think if you're in the 20 to 25% is a very good open rate, depending on what you're sending out. But generally, that's a accepted open rate.
We talked about the sales infrastructure. So we started talking about having a good messaging. It all starts with a good messaging and I would say positioning of the company, correct?
Correct. Yes. Once you have that, it's the foundation. It's kind of like it's the piping of a house. It's the pipes in a house that you always want it to work. Nobody walks into a house and goes, "Those are nice looking pipes." They
That's
notice other
true.
things. They
Yeah.
notice other things. It's just things that need to work. They just need to work, and they need to work all the time. And it needs to work when you turn it on and you turn it off. You know that regardless of who you put in place, it's going to work. I use the analogy of a sports team, a football team. Like the New England Patriots, they have a system and everybody works the system. You could put different people within the system and they've been successful. They were real successful for a real long time, but they, at a lot of times, took different people and put them in different positions to work the system to be successful.
Yeah.
And that way, businesses aren't reliant on one person or two people, one account, two accounts for all their revenue. You spread the risk across your foundation and your people and your customers.
So the foundational piece, it's the messaging and the positioning. So it all starts with there. So that would be your pipes of the house. And then the next thing is, what else do you have to put in the structure? Let's say that now you have the messaging, the positioning done, and you know that it's working, you have seen it work, and you want to ramp up your sales activities. So I would guess the next thing would be have a good CRM system.
Correct. Yeah. Have a good CRM that people are going to adopt and use, and not just have one to have one.
Yeah.
And it can't be punitive. It can't be punitive because all salespeople at some point think it's punitive. It's not. I mean, it's there to use as a tool to know that you're going down the right path. Next is the evaluation of your people. Do you have the right people in place? It goes across departments as you see it in finance. Do you have the right people in place? I mean, you have people that are tactical, you have people that are more strategic, you have people that are thought leaders. It's, do you have these people in place, to the right people in place to be successful? In a lot of sales positions that I've recruited for, you kind of look at the two A's, attitude and aptitude. If someone has the proper attitude, that's one thing. And aptitude, can they grasp what you're trying to sell or kind of what you're trying to market your solution as? Can they go out and effectively talk about a problem from a business standpoint? It's not a feature function anymore. It's, how does this affect the business?
Have you noticed that there's anything in terms of people's attitude or personality that make them exceptionally good salespeople?
Yeah, some people that are competitive, that don't want to lose. Listen, I've been doing it a while. I think people ask me, do you like winning or hate losing? I just hate losing because, you can't do anything about losing. Winning is fine. You can celebrate a win and it's done. It's like, it's done. But losing, it hurts and it should hurt. And you have to learn from it. When I get involved with sales teams, I always say it's always great to win and celebrate it for that moment. But then there's always the next one. You got to always move on to the next one and grow the business. But we have to learn from our losses and do a loss review. It's called a win-loss review. And the losses are actually more important than the wins at times, because you find out what you did right and what you did wrong so you can improve on that. I mean, it's all about improvement and, improving the cycle and not doing the same thing over and over again. If you do the same thing over and over again, that's the classical definition of insanity. You just keep on doing the same thing and think it's going to change. You think it's going to change the result. It's not. You diagnose kind of where you went wrong in the process, and a sales process that you lay out, whether that's a 5 or 6 step sales process, you kind of know where you are in those cycles, in those steps, whether it's the kind of in a prospect stage, in a qualified stage, in a negotiating stage, or in the closing stages. You kind of know exactly where somebody stands, and there's questions that need to be asked all along the way. And I think the problem is some folks try to circumvent the process, go from one step to the other real quick and thinks it's going to get done. It's not. It's not. I think if you follow the process through, you're going to have a more effective sales closure rate, and the quality of revenue will be better. The more I dig into some of the losses with folks, it was about skipping steps and being sloppy. And people didn't listen to people in the process. They didn't listen to what somebody needed. When you listen to people and take that pause and then come back with a suggestion, make sure it's the right suggestion that somebody asked for. Not just what you want to hear. Like, some people just want to tell what they want to hear. And that's where people go wrong. Is, I think, salespeople have to be quick thinkers, but you also have to be a little reserved in your thinking. Is think before you speak.
And it's interesting you talk about this process about there is a lot of active listening that I have seen. I've talked to a lot of salespeople, and one of the things that I've noticed personally, and I'm really curious if you agree with this too, is what separates a good salesperson from an exceptional salesperson is that ability to actively listen and really get deep into and actually asking those probing questions. Because I've noticed, even when I have been on sales conversations myself for my own business or for customers' businesses, the ones that I felt the immediate, oh, they can help me, is the ones that, one, they haven't talked much, and two, was the ones that really listened and they were asking these really insightful questions. And to get to that, you really need to be able to do that. But my question is, is this an innate, just a specific type of personality would have, or can you actually train someone to do that? How hard is it to train someone to do that?
You can train people on question-based selling. You can train on that. Personalities, can't train on that. You can coach them. Coaching is different than training. You can coach them on this is what you should do, and can you adapt to that? I think the expression that I learned early on is you have two ears and one mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak.
Yeah.
That came from my high school English teacher. She was great to me, the whole bit. But she said, if you listen twice as much as you spoke, you'd be excellent at this. And I said, okay, I'll try it because I could talk. And I started to do that. And it does click in, especially in the business world. These things click in, because you'll be able to listen better. You listen to and pick up on people's body languages, people's tone. It's not always what they say, it's how they say it, how people say it. And you can't get that from an email. I don't care what anybody says. You can't get that from an email because it's in print. It's in print unless somebody uses caps, big font, and bold. Then you can get it. Then you really know what's happening. But you can't get that from an effective. If you're able to have a conversation that's two ways and you're able to get as much as you give, that's a successful conversation. You talk about having a successful conversation. I've had conversations where I've said very little and it's been very successful because somebody's been able to say, these are the problems that I've had. And when I go in and work with a business owner, I'm doing probably 20% of the talking. They're doing 80. I consider it like I'm there to listen, to help them. I just can't help them. I can't go in and I'm here to help you because I don't know what you actually need. It's kind of like going to a surgeon. The surgeon can't just look at some x-rays and just go, I'm doing a surgery. I'm going to operate now unless you're really, really bad. But they need to tell you why to have the surgery, what you're experiencing, what you could experience with the surgery, what complications, what the rehab is going to be, and all these other things. That's what I do when I work with a small business, is lay it out. But I want to hear from, an owner or a CEO where they're at today and where they want to go, because their goals are important to me. I need to have those goals in place when I go in to set up the right process, is because I want to be aligned with their goals, with their company goals. And everybody has to share in those goals and work towards those goals, on a monthly, quarterly basis.
So the businesses that you go to, obviously they have done something right since they do have sales and they have revenue and they usually grow. What do you think that is that tipping point where you really feel the pain of not having a sales process versus just kind of muddling through?
It's when you're not growing, and you're not growing at a rate that is either in your industry or you need to get to the next level in the business. So maybe year over year, you grew at 5% one year and then 3% the next year and then 1%, and it's going downward, but your revenue, like we discussed in the beginning, is still going up. And what you need in place is that driver, and that driver is the sales process. That driver is having that foundation that's able to sustain more growth. Growth takes a lot of things out of people. It's not just, I'll just sell more. That doesn't work. Just sell more, I'll get more people. That doesn't work because you'll just be spending money. And, I think you see it from the financial side. Those companies that are more successful get the most out of their investments.
I think the key word is being intentional and deliberate, where you're spending time, where you're spending energy, and where you're spending money on. And I'm always interested to hear this. What are some of the common mistakes that businesses do when they're trying to do this on their own versus having someone in and help them with it? Because I see a lot of businesses trying to, we're going to save some money and we're not going to pay a consultant or someone. I'm just going to go try to do this on my own. And it always makes me very, very nervous because I know every time I hear that, it's like, oh, this is probably going to take twice as long and be 3 times more costly. But okay. So I try to influence that you should really hire someone to do that comes in, does their thing in and out, they're done, and you don't have to worry about the extra cost and you have things done right. But let's talk about what are some of the common mistakes that you see businesses making when they're trying to do this on their own.
So they don't know what they don't know. Like they don't know what they don't know because they're so insulated.
Yeah.
They're so insulated in their own environment. They don't have somebody that's coming in kind of fresh to this that can ask the questions that you said before, the questions to really cause them to think, is to cause them to think of what they really need. Having an internal person do it, fine, you could, or hiring somebody from the outside on a full-time basis. Yet some companies or some small businesses don't need a full-time sales leader. They don't. When the cost can't carry that, and the investment shouldn't be there. So when you look at having somebody come in from the outside, you got to find out first why and what your goals are. And those people that make the common mistakes are trying something from a book and not having a roadmap. You're not having a roadmap, at least to work on. Before I even work with a company, I give them a roadmap. They can do it on their own. It's kind of like when I was growing up as a kid, we'd go on road trips and my dad would put the map out on the dashboard, the old school. No Google Maps in this house, growing up. So
I remember those days.
He'd put the map on the dashboard and you could go and we'd circle where we're going. We would circle where we're going. It would go this road to this road to this road. We would put the pen on it and inevitably you could get there, but you would get lost and you would have to stop. We would stop at a gas station. Are we on the right path? We'd stop at a Burger King. Are we on the right path? And McDonald's, are we on the right path? And you always had to ask directions. As opposed to bringing somebody in with the proper roadmap to say, I've seen this before, and guide you in the process. And they're there to guide you and coach you in the process to be successful and use their experience. It's their experience is what you can't create that internally. You just can't create that internally. Somebody that has experienced, many small businesses, these are not highlights in my hair. This is from years and years of experience of doing this. You could probably fix a sink in your house or something small. Yeah, you could do that. I've done it. I put a faucet in my house. But if I'm going to remodel my bathroom, I'm not doing that on my own. I'm going to bring in an experienced plumber, an experienced contractor that has been there, said that, done that. As you said, it could cost twice as much doing it internally. I've seen people go over a 2-year period that if they called me in 2 years before would have saved half the money. Even with me and my time, I'm like, because there's opportunity costs, there's cost on your people, there's missed opportunity that business would go through.
Yeah. And I really like that analogy of a map and comparing an old school map to Google Map and it's very painful when you have that stop and go and you're constantly moving around. Are we going into the right direction? Do we need to bring someone in now? No, we're going to continue doing that. I mean, there's a lot of stop and go and there's a lot of uncertainty. So I can definitely relate to that. So Eric, what is it that, like, let's say that someone who's listening to this, they know that they need a sales infrastructure and they have some pieces already. They have a CRM system. They think they have messaging already, but now they have to figure out, how do I actually train these salespeople? Like, I need an infrastructure. What is one thing that they can do in the next month or so to get them closer to having this more developed in their business?
So I think it's find out and diagnose and work on one area at a time. That's what I do when I go in with a client. We work on area by area by area. And if it's training somebody, get somebody to train or having them go to a training. Now there's a lot of great online trainings. There's a lot of great online training companies to use for salespeople. But for me, have somebody from the outside look at that, just give them an independent view, whether that's an advisor, whether that's themselves or a third-party person to come in and evaluate. And they would do the same thing in areas of finance. They would do that in IT. They would do that in HR. It's just sales and marketing. This is really the driver of the business. This is going to be able to fuel other investments. So I believe it's an important investment. It's not a cost. It's really an investment that is going to pay off in the long run.
And I got to ask, since you said that there's a lot of good online trainings, is there anything particularly that you would recommend?
No, I mean, there's not one over another. There's a bunch of companies that do it now that you can subscribe to a library. They have 27 modules, but I'm kind of agnostic when it comes to that. When I work with a company, I'll give them some suggestions on sales training. There's not one right answer, but if somebody would like, they can always contact me or you and get in contact with me. I'm here to help.
Speaking of, where can people contact you, Eric?
They can contact me on LinkedIn. Kathy has my contact information, but they can also email me at ebalis at Sales Acceleration, SALES, Acceleration CELERATION.com. Here to help. I always have conversations in advance. One thing that I do offer is a 10-point assessment in advance. It's complimentary, where I'm able to give people sort of that roadmap, the old school roadmap. And if they want to engage, that's fine. If not, I give them something of value that they could potentially use.
Awesome, Eric. And I'm going to put all of these in the show notes. So you're going to see Eric's email address, his LinkedIn profile, and the website. It's going to be all in the show notes. So if you're interested, go take a look there. Eric, thank you so much.
This has been so very exciting. Kathy, I appreciate your time, and this was a great session. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today, and I hope that today's episode has inspired you to start building your sales infrastructure in your business if you don't have one, or maybe even revamp the one that you currently have. Also, if you love this episode, you can find all the timestamps, show notes, blog posts, and links and more on the website, newcastlefinance.us/podcast. And before I go, I do have a favor to ask. If you have enjoyed this episode, and if you are listening to this on Apple Podcast, if you could please go to the show and tap the number of stars that you think the show deserves, because this helps the algorithm so that other people can find it and benefit from it as well. Thanks so much. Until next time.